Ali Abdaal, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. This is going to be fun. And we've got your little drinks over here, which we can sip on throughout the episode.
And we've got your mechanical keyboard in front of us as well.
I feel like we're doing a lot of shilling here. We've got my book, the keyboard, your drinks.
Yeah,
but it's kind of nice because we're also working with the same company to put this stuff together, and it's cool that there is this sort of creator collaboration-y stuff going on now with physical products.
I think so. I like the fact, having something that is my own that I spent so much time building is so nice. So that's the brand new, right now when we're recording this Tropical Ice, which is the white one, isn't out. So this is going to be first taste test for you. It is ambient as well, so crack that open.
What does ambient mean?
Warm. It's warm rather than chilled.
I see.
So have a crack of that and see what you think.
Oh, it's very nice. That's legit. Cheers.
Cheers. Yeah, this is my favorite flavor. It's like it's a white monster killer.
Yeah, it was weird. So when I tried this one for the first time, I was in LA and I didn't have much sleep for like 2 nights because I had like a 8 a.m. meeting with my team the next day and late nights and stuff because like hanging out with people in LA. And I cracked open one of these. I went to the local WeWork, had one of these, and I genuinely felt so focused. And my team were literally commenting. My team were commenting, be like, "Have you got so much done?" Because I was just like,
yep.
And I'm not sure if it was placebo, but like, I was just.
Dude, if it works, it works. So your new book, Feel Good Productivity, everyone needs to go and buy that right now. I know you've spent an awful lot of time working on it for a long time.
Yeah.
Why does feeling good have anything to do with productivity? They're 2 words that don't usually go together.
They don't usually, but there is a large amount of evidence that suggests that they very much do go together. So one of the theories, have you come across this, the broaden and build theory?
No.
So this is the idea. There's a psychologist called Barbara Fredrickson who in 2001 came up with this theory. It was based on studies that showed that if you get people into a lab and get them to do tasks of creativity, and then you split them into 2 groups, and you give one group a candy bar or something, and you give the other group nothing, for some reason, the group who gets a candy bar comes up with more creative solutions to whatever problem that they're trying to solve. And so the theory was, okay, there's something about, priming someone with positive emotions that affects our creativity. And then they did, one of the theories around this is back in caveman times, if, for example, someone was experiencing positive emotions, that's usually a sign of safety. Things are pretty chill, things are good. And so when the cavemen are experiencing positive emotions, when they're feeling good, they are more inclined to go out and explore. So they're going to see what's in that cave over there, what's in that forest over there. Let me build my friendships and stuff. And so Professor Barbara Fredrickson came up with this theory called broaden and build, which is that when you feel good, when you experience positive emotions, it broadens the amount of actions that are available to you, and it builds resources like social connections and actual physical resources and stuff. Whereas the converse, negative emotions, if caveman human is feeling negative emotions, it's like, shit, I'm stressed. There is a tiger on the horizon. I have a very small range of options to choose from, fight, flight, freeze, and I have to act within that range. And so the idea is that feeling good makes us more creative, more productive, less stressed, and boosts our energy levels. And there's so many studies that back all this up. And conversely, negative emotions have the opposite effect. So very few people can be creative and can perform productively when they are feeling negative emotions.
What is the link between creativity and productivity? Because those 2 things don't necessarily sound synonymous to me. In fact, some of the most creative people that I know, like my housemate, Zach, are really, really unproductive. The executive function and openness seem to be basically opposite ends of the same spectrum. How are you squaring this circle of creativity and productivity?
Yeah, so for me, productivity, I'm defining as doing whatever matters to you. In a way that's intentional and effective and, ideally enjoyable as well. So for some people, if you are an artist, then creativity is productivity. And the studies that they do on this stuff don't use the word productivity, they use the word performance. And so however you define performance, like studies in the workplace, performance is judged by evaluations from your manager. If you're a writer, performance is judged by word count. If you're in creative tasks, performance is judged by how creative you were. So I kind of smuggle the 2 concepts in together because I actually think there is not that much of a difference between creativity and productivity, depending on, for example, if you're an accountant, then creative accounting is probably unproductive because it's not what you're trying to do. But if you're a knowledge worker, if you're a writer, if you're a YouTuber, or whatever, creativity is productivity because it's literally what you're trying to do.
And there's often, I guess, power law multipliers available where you come up with a solution that means that you can be more efficient, which requires you to probably be creative ahead of that. It's like if you come up with a creative solution to a productivity problem.
Exactly. Yeah. And I think in the world today, like especially people listening to this, most people do not have jobs where the goal is to just crank out more widgets per hour. There is, Hormozi talks about this, the people who are billionaires are not working any harder than you and me. They're just playing different chess moves.
Yeah.
And often, finding the right chess move to play means that you can get a 10x outcome without working anywhere near as hard as someone who's trying to work 10 times harder.
That was the Sean Puri insight. His is a bit more controversial, where he says hard work is massively overrated. But the lesson is that it's more important about what you work on rather than how hard you work. Because
Absolutely.
the correct decision, if you say that work done equals time times intensity,
yeah.
but that's only within effectiveness, right? Like work done is time times intensity, but you can get different outcomes based on how much you leverage. So, all right, you and me have been friends for a long time. You've spent years writing this book and even longer building up your corpus of productivity stuff on your YouTube channel. Given that you've written about productivity, why is it not filled with Pomodoro technique and time blocking and how to build a good Notion template? Why is it not just a tools guide? Why is it more feely?
Yeah. So initially when I started writing this, it was more of a toolsy type thing because, as a productivity bro, I love learning about the tools and the templates and stuff. But I realized that in my own life, the thing that has made me most productive, people would always ask, how were you able to build a YouTube channel and the business while working as a doctor? And, that's all demanding and stuff. And really, it was never because I had a magical to-do list. And when people look at my phone, they're like, oh, actually, it just looks like everyone else's. It's a bit of a mess. My to-do list is always overflowing. It was never really about that. It was about the fact that I consistently found ways to make whatever I was doing feel good. I found ways to make whatever I was doing energizing and enjoyable. And it wasn't always like that. So when I started off working as a junior doctor in the NHS, conditions were pretty bad, and they still are. And I had this sort of grindy mentality where I was feeling drained every day at work, wasn't enjoying it. But my view was, you've just got to struggle through this because everyone says the first 2 years are the hardest. And as long as you struggle for long enough, then on the other side of that, whatever that thing is, in my case, it was once I become a specialist, then once I become a consultant, once I hit some arbitrary milestone, then my life will be chill. But then I would speak to people who were at those milestones and their lives were not chill either. They were also having a pretty terrible time at work. And this sort of made me realize, wait a minute. I'm trying to juggle this full-time job and also build my YouTube channel, my business on the side. I don't have any energy to do this. I do actually have time in the evenings because I was only working 60 hours a week and there's like another 50 hours to play with. But I just didn't have the energy. And it was when I started to actively find ways to make medicine, my day job, feel more energizing and enjoyable. That was what really unlocked the energy to focus on my YouTube channel. And I've spoken to you about this sometimes where you manage to hit the gym way more consistently than I do. And you also manage to record podcasts way more consistently than I do, like at a stupid rate of like 3 or 4 or 5 per week. But I suspect you don't need to grind. It doesn't feel like a grind to you. It feels like play. I suspect it feels good.
I've had to do things to make it feel more like play. So especially when it comes to training, one of the things that I've had to do is get a coach. So for a very long time, I trained on my own very hard, and that was great. But I'm 35 now, and I've been training for a decade and a bit, and I just can't push myself as hard in the gym on my own as I used to. When I'm training with one of my boys, I can. If I'm training in a class, I can. If I've got my coach with me, I can. But on my own, I can't. And I was like, all right, well, this seems to be a change in my motivation setup, so I need to account for it. So I got a coach. Yeah. So I'm training with my trainer 3 times a week. I'm training in a class twice a week, and I'm training with one of my boys once a week. That's a 6-day-a-week split.
Wow.
The same goes for recording the podcast. If I was a YouTuber like you, it would be really difficult because I find sitting down, writing a script, getting in front of the camera, all of that quite hard. The accountability, I work very well with accountability and also working in groups, or working at least with someone. The podcast is always with someone. So I guess I've learned one of the quirks of me, which is that although I work well in solitude, I'm most accountable when there is someone waiting for it. The same reason, if I was, my journaling for myself compliance is 50%, but my newsletter compliance weekly is 100%, right? 1,000 words a week for 3 years now, right?
Nice.
Every single week without stop. Rupture an Achilles, it's holiday, I'm in Guatemala, I'm getting my visa, whatever, like always done. Wrote it on the plane from Peterson to the UK and uploaded it on plane Wi-Fi 2 days ago, right? Because I know that if I don't do it, people are going to notice. So I've realized that is a motivation for me. Training is on the feel-good side. The other stuff is a little bit more stick than carrot, I suppose, or at least it's motivator rather than encourager.
Yeah.
But yeah, finding the quirks of you and then reverse engineering an environment that allows you to tweak the very specific knobs and levers that trigger your motivation. And I don't think that that's you being the David Goggins inside of you might say, you should just do this because you want, like, you should do hard things and blah, blah, blah. It's like, well, yeah, but you can do hard things in an easier way.
Yeah.
And that's what that is.
Absolutely. So there's two things I would say to that. So firstly, that's an amazing example. The third chapter of this book is all about people. And there is just stupid amounts of evidence that says that the way that whenever we work in a way that involves other people, it's more energizing, it's more enjoyable, it's more motivating. This is why people benefit from accountability buddies. The way I used to do it was at university. I found that if I was grinding away on my own, I'd be pretty miserable. I'd be effective because, you know, I can employ discipline and willpower to force myself to sit there on my own and do my work. But if I go to the library with 5 other friends, we're all doing our work.
Was it PomSoc that you used to do?
Yeah, the Pomodoro Society. We would do Pomodoros together. We would do 25 minutes of work. We were all in different subjects, studying different things, and then 5 minutes of break. And there was something about doing it with friends that just made the whole thing way more enjoyable, way more energizing. And it meant that I had energy in the evenings to, I don't know, like hang out with friends or like work on my websites back in the day. And I think this is something that people don't think about enough. There is this idea that like, oh, I focus better when I'm on my own. It's like, okay, you focus better when you're on your own. And there are some small number of people that are just totally chill about that. They never struggle with procrastination. They never struggle with distraction. They're just able to grind it out on their own. If you're that person and you're also having fun, then great. This advice is not for you. But for the rest of us, for most of us, humans are social creatures. We benefit from the energy of the people around us. So finding a way to do anything with other people makes you way more effective and generally makes it way more fun as well.
Yeah, it's a delicate balance. I remember I went to an office for the first time in a long time toward the back end of COVID and was reminded, I always used to think, oh, look at how distracted I get when I sit at the computer and that 5 minutes on YouTube or that 10 minutes scrolling Instagram or whatever, like you see it from the front row seat. But I went into an office and saw one person go, anybody want a coffee? And then they go, oh, yeah, have we got any of that blonde roast left? It's like, no, we haven't. We need to get some in. Oh, okay. What about those Vietnamese world biscuit? And you realize that someone asking the whole room if they want a coffee or not just sapped 3 minutes out of everybody. And the 3 minutes isn't much, but that's 40 times a day, right? That's just always happening over and over and over again. So, yeah, I think the balance between not being around people and not working with people so that they distract you, but also realizing that it's a motivating force is important. All right, so people, important. Having accountability buddies, also important. Where's power? What's that? What's that coming to?
Yeah, power, chapter 2. So power is one of the key factors that drives intrinsic motivation or internal motivation. So for listeners who might not be familiar, there's broadly 2 types of motivation. There's extrinsic and intrinsic. So extrinsic motivation is when you are doing something because of the external reward you're going to get as a result or to avoid some sort of punishment. So kind of doing a thing because working a job for the money is extrinsic motivation. Intrinsic motivation is when you're doing it for its own sake. There is something about the process that's either enjoyable or that feels meaningful to you, and therefore you're doing it for internal reasons, for your own reasons. And basically all the evidence shows that internal or intrinsic motivation is way more powerful and durable than extrinsic motivation. And in fact, the more extrinsic motivation you have, even if you are intrinsically motivated to do something, extrinsic motivators often crowd out intrinsic motivators.
How so?
It's unclear, but I guess anecdotally from my life, I've really seen this. So back when my YouTube channel was a side hustle, I was intrinsically motivated to make videos, and it would be fun, and I'd be sharing my message and making videos, and I was having a great time. But weirdly, as soon as sponsors started paying lots of money for those videos, and now all of a sudden there's a deadline on the video, and there is like a large amount of money attached to it, you would think that, oh my God, I could make $20,000 by just filming this YouTube video, would make it way more fun.
I get to do what I was doing before plus $20,000.
Exactly. But what it actually feels like is, this thing was once fun, but now I've got a deadline, and now I've got a boss, and now I've got an overlord.
You turned your love into a labor.
Exactly. And this is one of the problems with monetizing your hobbies, in that my view is that if you monetize your hobbies for pocket money, that's really fun. Back when I was a magician, I used to go around university doing magic tricks and balls and shit. I was paid £100 here and there. That's fun. I'm not relying on the £100 to live. But if I had to be a professional magician where I was relying on that income to live, now all of a sudden magic stops being fun. And you hear musicians struggle with this all the time. Like, Ed Sheeran used to enjoy music, and now it's become work, and he cannot relax. Like, in the evenings he has to paint because he has to find a creative outlet to recharge his energies because music is now work. So part of the problem, I'm a big fan of monetizing your passions and like finding a way to make a living out of it. But there is this sort of fine line in that the motivation can sometimes become extrinsic rather than intrinsic. But coming back to power is this idea of autonomy and competence. If you feel like you have autonomy, control, responsibility over the things that you're doing, and you feel like you are actually good at the things you are doing, that leads to this feeling of empowerment, this feeling of power, which is a huge factor of intrinsic motivation.
How can people make themselves feel more autonomous? A lot of people have got some sort of accountability boss of some kind that they need to be reporting to.
Yeah.
What's the solution?
So there's like a spectrum of autonomy. You can basically have control over three things. You can have control over the outcome. You can have control over the process, and you can have control over the mindset. Outcome, process, and mindset. So a lot of people don't have control over the outcome. Like when I was a doctor, I didn't have control over the outcome. I had to do what I was told. I couldn't just choose that. I can now as an entrepreneur and stuff, but like, most people are not.
Like when a patient comes in to see you and instead of diagnosing them, paint with them or something.
Yeah, like I'm not allowed to do that. So I have to do the things that I'm told. Also, I was junior. I had to do what the seniors wanted, all this kind of stuff. But even when you don't have control over what you're doing, you have enormous control over how you're doing it. And so what I realized, the first few months where I was working as a doctor, I made the mistake of thinking the way to conserve my energy is by doing the bare minimum. I made the mistake of thinking, you know what, I'm just going to do what I'm told. I'm going to grind it out these couple of years, and let me just make sure I get home with enough energy to film my YouTube videos. But weirdly, approaching anything with that level of half-assedness really drains our energy. It is not fun. Looking at the watch is not fun. It's not a fun way to go through your workday when you're like, okay, I'm just going to do what I'm told, right? I'm just going to do it. I'm just going to grind it out. And kind of the realization for me was weirdly, on weekend shifts, I felt weirdly more energized afterwards, which is kind of weird because weekend shifts as a doctor are like more busy because there's fewer staff, there's more patients, more emergencies, shit is going on, but I felt weirdly energized. And I realized it's because on weekend shifts, I was taking responsibility and I was taking more ownership of the things that I was doing. The way I was approaching my patients was thinking, shit, the buck kind of ends with me because I don't want to ring up the consultant. So I'm going to chase up these blood results. I'm going to call radiology. I'm going to do the things. And so I was working harder, but because I felt like I owned the process of what I was doing, suddenly I had more energy and work became more fun and the shifts absolutely flew by to the point that I was like swapping with colleagues to be like, hey, can I work a weekend? Because I was like, it's so much more fun working on a weekend.
And what about mindset?
Mindset is, there's a really, really good blog post by Seth Godin that I've read years ago that I still think back to, which is there is an enormous difference between I have to do this and I get to do this. And whenever we find ourselves thinking, I have to do X, we can always do a reframe in our minds. I choose to do X. I get to do X. I am blessed to be able to do X. And even just that, like this is my single biggest practical takeaway for anyone listening to this. The next time you feel like, I have to do something, just change it up in your head. You don't actually have to do anything. Everything is a choice. Sure, there are consequences to all choices and all that crap, but fundamentally you are choosing to do it. And if you take that ownership and switch it around in the mind is a powerful device. The mind can, the way we think about something profoundly changes the way our physiology responds to it, the way our body reacts. There's a cool way that sociologists measure life satisfaction. I think we were talking about this on the IFS stage. For people unfamiliar, so one way of measuring life satisfaction is by giving someone a survey and being like, how satisfied are you with your life? But then, people are not self-aware, they don't really know what's going on. But the other way that sociologists do it is they have a little pager, or I think it's an app these days, and they ping you a few times a day, and they ask you one question. They ask you, if you could, would you choose to fast forward the experience that you're currently having to get to the end of it? So, for example, if you're at work, would you choose to fast forward to the end of your workday? If you're on a flight, would you choose to fast forward to the end of the flight? If you're, putting your kids to bed, would you choose to fast forward that so that they're already asleep? And they look at what proportion of your day would you choose to fast forward? And what they find is that, the people who would choose to fast forward a large proportion of their day, that is an indicator that actually you're not that satisfied with life because you would rather not experience a big chunk of your time than experience
Seems
it.
like a great definition. And
so what I've learned to do is I ask myself this question a lot. If I ever find myself waiting in line for something, or I don't know, I'm in an Uber and I'm like, I just want to get to my destination, or whatever the thing might be, or even doing work that I don't quite enjoy, I think, would I fast forward this? And if the answer is ever yes, I know that there is a mindset shift I need to make, because I know that Someone, if Eckhart Tolle was in that position, he would be able to friggin' enjoy the process. So why can't I? And I find switching from a have to a get to is incredible for making me feel more like I have autonomy. Therefore, I have power. Therefore, I feel good.
So much comes back to gratitude, man. It's like, it's so giving an answer that people already feel like they know is way less pioneering and like revelatory. But yeah, gratitude just seems to be such a solution. It's a prophylactic against life not being the way that you want it to. Yeah, switching the...
It's also a treatment.
Yes, yeah, true.
Like 5 minutes of gratitude journaling has the same impact as doubling your income in terms of happiness levels.
Wow.
And so, honestly, just being more grateful and being like, yeah, what a time to be alive. What is that phrase from Kurt Vonnegut, which is something to the effect of, as you go through life, remind yourself on multiple occasions, if this isn't nice, I don't know what is.
Naval, if you can't be happy with a coffee, you won't be happy on a yacht. Yeah, just and I like the fact that you're thinking about how can we find in the mundane, how can we find ways to not only take control from a performance perspective, where I know that if I switch this mindset, I will be happier, but also it's actually the way that you enjoy your life, like moment to moment, forgetting the outcome that you're going to get on the other side of this from a productivity perspective.
And as a side effect, you'll also be more productive. But kind of the point of the book really is that what I'm hoping people will do is that they will read it because they want to be more productive. But what they will find as a result of because most of the research in here is really from positive psychology rather than from, I don't know, organizational performance design and stuff. Because what I found through doing all this research is, yes, I'm more productive when I feel good, but also I am just happier and more satisfied with life. And I feel good. And that is actually an inherent good. So the goal is not actually to get more done. The goal is to generally be more satisfied and fulfilled with life.
Well, ultimately, the reason I think that people want to be more productive is that they presume on the other side of their increased productivity would be a life that they're going to enjoy more. I'm going to have more fun. I'm going to be more satisfied. I'm going to be happier. Okay, well, there is a shortcut to get there, which is just be happier in the moment, do the things that maximize happiness now, and then the productivity can either come along for the ride or not.
Absolutely.
It's so funny, man, that you set off to try and write this thing and begin this journey of productivity as a solution, first off, to being at uni and being a med student, and then being a doctor, and then being a doctor with a business, and then being a doctor with multiple businesses. And what you ended up doing was almost completely throwing productivity out the window and realizing that it's just one of multiple different triggers and levers that you can pull to get satisfied with life.
Yeah. And that emotions are like the baseline of this whole thing. I think earlier on in my productivity broiness, I really underappreciated the importance of emotions because I was pretty I still am to this day, pretty unself-aware of my own emotions and like what was going on.
Yeah, me too.
But it was when I got punched in the face with this like working freaking 60 hours a week in the NHS where people are dying and where I'm potentially responsible for some people dying and like, oh, if you make a mistake, like you think about it all night. I was like, oh shit, all the stoicism has not prepared me for this onslaught of negative emotions.
Yeah.
And the solution to that was finding a way to make everything feel good.
Okay, what about play?
Cliche. Play is the first chapter. Play, I think, is really fun. So there's a lot of Nobel Prize winners who attribute their success to the idea of play. The guys that invented graphene, Richard Feynman, who invented the atomic bomb, or who helped with the atomic bomb and then won a Nobel Prize. Richard Feynman at one point was feeling totally burnt out in his career. He was a physics professor. He was like, he got all the accolades. He ticked all the boxes, but he did not enjoy physics. He felt burned out by it. And there's this really cool story in his autobiography where he talks about how at the Cornell University cafeteria, a student was chucking a plate up in the air. And Feynman noticed that the Cornell logo was like rotating at a slightly different rate than like the center of the plate or some shit like that. And he was like, wait a minute. Why is the logo on the out of the plate rotating differently to the inside of the plate? And he was like, I don't really care. I'm the professor. I've invented the atomic bomb. This is not significant. But then he kind of reminded himself that actually, why did I used to enjoy physics? I used to enjoy physics because I treated it like play. I did things just for the fun of them. And so he set out to model the equations of how this bloody plate would rotate. And his colleagues were like, dude, what the hell are you doing? You're supposed to be the great Professor Richard Feynman and you're like writing equations about a freaking wobbling plate. And he would respond with, I'm just doing it for the fun of it. There is no use in it whatsoever. And actually, what happened is that A, he developed his love of physics back again. He cured his burnout, and he ended up, the wobbling of that plate ended up leading to the equations that helped him win the Nobel Prize.
Who's Alberto Lopez?
Alberto Lopez is this climbing. He was one of the Olympic climbers. And rock climbing in the Olympics is an interesting sport because if you watch it on TV, you find that they all look really happy, which is in sharp contrast to like the sprinters who look like really stressed. They're focused on this one goal, and they're like, whereas rock climbers seem to be having a laugh, having a joke, even though they're competing in the Olympics and competing against each other. They're like kind of pointing the routes out to each other, and they seem quite happy about the whole thing. And rock climbing was how Mihai Csikszentmihalyi, who discovered the concept of flow back in the 1970s, this idea of flow state. He noticed that rock climbers get into this weird flow state where they feel like they're fully engaged, but they view the stakes as being low, and that combination of full engagement with sufficiently low stakes is what creates that feeling of play, and can often often what creates that feeling of flow. And so this gets at the idea of like, how do we experience more play in our work and in our lives? One of the big answers is to just lower the stakes. So, for example, Roger Federer, when he's playing the Wimbledon final, especially when he's defending his title, he probably is not feeling that playful about it because the stakes are too
serious.
high. It's really serious. The stakes are too high. Whereas, most of us are not in that kind of situation a lot of the time. And most of us, when it comes to our work, if we can find a way to just dial down the seriousness, approach it with a bit more sincerity, as Alan Watts would say, dial down, lower the stakes, lower the bar. Think of it not as, this is a big thing I'm trying to do, but instead think of it as, I'm just having fun here. That is often how people perform way better and feel more playful about their work.
From a tactical perspective, how do you feel less serious about your work, especially if you care about it? If you're the sort of person that can listen to me and you waffle on for a couple of hours about productivity, you probably care about the outcomes that you're getting in your life, which means that you might apply due or undue pressure to the outcomes that you're going to get.
Yeah.
How can someone tactically lower the stakes?
Okay, good question. I have 3 strategies. Number 1 is there's a great phrase from Alan Watts. He calls it sincere, not serious. No one wants to play a board game with someone who's too serious about it. It's just not fun. Like they take, stickler for the rules. It kind of drains everyone's energy. But you also don't want to play a board game with someone who's completely uncaring, because it's like, well, what's the fun in that? Like they're not even trying. You want to play with someone who plays sincerely. And so I think that phrase itself, sincere, not serious, if we find ourselves feeling a bit stressed, feeling like the stakes are too high, often that's where procrastination and distraction kicks in, where we're like, there's this emotional hurdle of like, this thing is, writing a book is like a hard thing because it's a book and a book is a big deal. That's where we find ourselves getting distracted and looking for the dopamine hit on TikTok or whatever the thing might be. Thinking, let me just genuinely approach this with sincerity rather than seriousness is tactic number 1 that I find super helpful. Tactic number 2 is by, at the start of each day, I ask myself one simple question. And that question is, what is today's adventure going to be? Now, this speaks to the idea, it's a fairly common principle in psychology and performance research that making a plan at the start of the day is a very useful thing to do. Some people do it the night before, most people do it in the morning. If you can figure out what is your most important task, Brian Tracy calls it eat that frog. What's the one thing that if you got that thing done today would be a win? The adventure question is basically that, but framed in the language of adventure. Because if you think of anything as an adventure, you can ask yourself the question, what would this look like if it were fun? This is so similar to Tim Ferriss's question of what would it look like if it were easy, but I reframe it as, I literally have a post-it note on my computer monitor, what would this look like if it were fun? Because if you frame something as an adventure and just genuinely ask yourself, how can I make this fun? The mind will inevitably come up with loads of different ways to make this fun. So that's another tangible thing. What would this look like if it were fun? For me personally, what I found is that everything becomes more fun when I have background music, preferably from like Lord of the Rings, Concerning Hobbits, the Shire theme tune, that kind of
The fact that you have a girlfriend continues to amaze me.
Mate, Concerning Hobbits, Lord of the Rings. When I had all these realizations around feel good productivity, I realized part of why working in a doctor's office is a bit grim is because the environment is just it's not nice. It's like the NHS doesn't have much money. I got this 20 quid Bluetooth speaker from Amazon. I attached it to the light on the ceiling, and I would just play movie soundtracks while I was writing my discharge letters. And initially, the consultants would come in and be like, "What the hell's going on here?" But then they would be like, "Oh, I get it. Yeah, it's Harry Potter, it's Lord of the Rings, Pirates of the Caribbean." They would recognize some of the songs, a bit of, I don't know, Hans Zimmer every now and then. And even just having music in the background makes it feel more playful. It just makes it more fun.
Yep.
And so what I'm trying to do here is encourage people. We can all, yes, not everything has to be fun all the time. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is we can always find ways to make everything we're doing just a little bit more fun. Approach it with a little bit more play. And yes, that means we'll be more productive, but that's also not the point. The point is we'll just feel better about life.
Yeah, I'd love to get you to sit down with Hormozy at some point, maybe over the next year. I'll manage to get a round table between us for dinner or something, because Alex seems to deprioritize. He finds fun in the grind, but it's his like executive function and grind muscle is so hypertrophied that he's just prepared to continue to smash that lever. But I would be interested to know what would happen if you took an inventory of his, or an MOT of his particular productivity work setup and said, hey, why don't we try like giving you a window, or why don't we try like this or that or the other? I'd be very interested to know just how robust, whether there's people for whom this doesn't apply quite so much. Something tells me that we need to be careful taking global advice from people that are absolute outliers within their performance. It seems like this is a much more like normie, middle of the bell curve, robust like solution. You know what I mean? Like, you know, lots and lots of the people that we know that are outliers would still benefit from this.
Yeah. I think this is where, you know, I've listened to your interview with David Goggins. I've listened to both his books. They're great. I love the guy. But David Goggins' thing, I think, is like he's an outlier there, where everything is about discipline. You know, Huberman was telling that story about how Goggins was up at 3 a.m. and just genuinely going for a run because that's the sort of guy he is. And what I worry about is that normal people who are not David Goggins will then think, oh, fuck, I'm just not disciplined enough. I just need to get more discipline. I just need to grind harder. I just need to wake up earlier and all that stuff. And for a very small subset of people, that works. But for most people, you know, human psychology is not geared towards continuing to push yourself and, you know, wake up at 3 o'clock in the morning just so you can go for a run and continue to cause pain to yourself. Like Goggins freaking runs Ironman with broken legs. Human psychology is not geared for that. And it is literally it's like trying to play life on hard mode. And I think I love the message that David Goggins shares, but it's also not realistic for a lot of people. Like a lot of us broadly, if you ask people why they do what they do, they do the things that feel good. No one struggles with discipline or motivation to watch Netflix or to play video games or to hang out with friends because it just freaking feels good. You probably don't struggle with discipline and motivation to do podcasts because it feels good to you.
Correct.
I, most of the time, don't struggle with discipline or motivation to make YouTube videos or to write because it feels good to me. I actually do struggle with podcasts, especially over Zoom. And I find that drains my energy, and which is why I'm less motivated by that. I struggle with the gym because I've yet to find a way to make it feel good consistently, especially while traveling. We do the things that feel good. And so if we care about work, we can find ways of making whatever matters to us feel good.
Well, you can
see... It's a more robust way of...
Yeah, you could imagine feeling good as a force multiplier to your discipline. Like that you have this tank of it and you can get either 1 mile per gallon or 100 miles per gallon based on, are you driving uphill, i.e. not enjoying it, or are you driving downhill, i.e. this is enjoyable to me?
Absolutely. I think this is where discipline comes. So this is how I square this idea of discipline, because I do value discipline. I think with any task, it's exactly this hill analogy that you're talking about that I think of it. If you enjoy the process, it feels like going downhill. If you don't enjoy the process, it feels like going uphill. Going uphill obviously requires you to exert willpower and discipline over the long term. But the key thing is, before anything, there's a bit of a hump. Even before something that feels good, there's a bit of a hump. Like for you, going to the gym feels good, but still a bit of a hump to actually just get there because maybe you're feeling a bit tired.
Waking up on a morning,
Exactly.
It's always cold, I got to wait for the Uber.
And as long as we are employing discipline to just get over the hump, that is a great use of discipline because that is very sustainable. Like just using discipline in small doses to get started with a thing that you want to do. But to use discipline and willpower to keep going with a thing that you want to do, that's so draining. That's so taxing. Yeah,
we definitely need to be careful. Dude, I've contributed to this. I've sat down and nodded at David Goggins and Hormozy and Jocko as they've said things that are similar to this. But we do need to be careful about the heroic narrative that discipline in face of misery and suffering gives, right? Because it is a heroic narrative, and there will be days when life comes and smashes you in the face and when you need to have built up that discipline muscle sufficiently. But finding the balance between that not being so atrophied that it can't be deployed, but you not using it unnecessarily when there is a simpler, more enjoyable route toward achieving the outcome that you want is very, very difficult. And it can't be synthesized into do hard things even when, or especially when you don't feel like it, right? Like I can't hammer this into a meme.
Yeah.
But it's holding two relatively conflicting views in your mind at the same time. Discipline is important, and I should continue to use it so it doesn't evaporate. And I should use discipline as little as possible in my day-to-day life by trying to design the things that I do to be as enjoyable as possible so that discipline is not something I rely on. It just happens easily and naturally to me.
Absolutely. I think there's, I'd be interested to get Hormozi's take on this, but one thing that he said that really struck with me is when I was 20, I wanted to be a millionaire. When I was a millionaire, I wanted to be 20.
Yeah.
And, I'm a millionaire now, and I actually don't want to be 20 because I feel like I enjoyed the process of getting there. And I would love to live my life not wanting to go back because actually I have just enjoyed every step of the journey. Probably means I'm not going to be as successful as Hormozi is financially. But
depends on what the criteria of success is, bro.
So.
Absolutely depends on what the criteria of success is.
I'm sure Alex will have a more nuanced take on this, and obviously I get that. It's a nice quote, it's a nice soundbite. I do vibe with the sentiment behind it, but I think enjoying the journey while also striving towards whatever goals you have is literally the point.
Yeah, what are you optimizing for? It's just such a great question. My newsletter a couple of weeks ago, I had Morgan Housel on the show, and the guy's just fucking phenomenal, right? This quote that I've been playing with for a long time from Sapolsky, Huberman shared it. Dopamine is not about the pursuit of happiness. It is about the happiness of pursuit.
Oh, nice.
So much of life and enjoyment is about the anticipation of things coming. In fact, the anticipation is often actually more enjoyable than the experience itself. Tim Ferriss used to book week-long holidays years and years in advance so that he could get as much enjoyment out of the anticipation as he could. This puts a new perspective on it's not the journey, it's the destination. There actually is no destination. Each arrival at the destination simply marks the beginning of another journey toward the next destination. Morgan Housel told me on the show the other week, he planned this big holiday with his family for a long time. They've got kids. They finally did it after booking time off from Collaborative Fund and from his writing and wife and children and travel and all the rest of it. He arrives at this hotel, and on the first night that he arrives there, he steps out onto the balcony of this place he's been planning for ages. And the first thought in his mind was, it'd be so good if we came back here next year. Like, this place would be so good to come back to next year. So literally during the experience of the destination, he was artificially creating another journey already.
I had a really stark realization of this in a really trivial way recently. One of the there's a few different reasons. So one of the questions I think about a lot is, what would I do if money were no object? And if money were no object, how would I change how I spend my time? And one of the things that I often land on is I'd actually probably play more video games. I really enjoyed video games when I was a kid. I'd love to have a bit more time to play video games. And I was mentioning this to my team who were traveling with me, and they were like, "Yeah, but you don't play video games that much. Like, what's going on there?" But I spend a lot of time anticipating the joy of playing video games, and I get so much joy out of, like, you know what? I want to buy the highest end gaming laptop imaginable. Is it the Razer Blade 18-inch or the Alienware 18-inch? I can afford that now because I've got merch. Guys, buy my book, please.
Yeah.
But in the past, I was salivating over like a £5,000 gaming PC. And the anticipation of 6 months of doing the research and watching the videos was so joyful. And then I got it, and I was like, I'm never going to turn this thing on because I actually have more fun in my work. So there's something profound about, like, even now, I know that if I buy this laptop, I actually won't use it.
All of the enjoyment's going to stop.
All the enjoyment goes away. I'm like, okay, well, I guess I got to play video games now. Yeah. But the anticipation of, like, I could buy it whenever I want is a thing I'm holding on to because it's just free happiness points for literally zero cost.
Yeah. Well, that Tim Ferriss hack of booking holidays years and years in advance, so good. There was a study done on, I think it was British clubbers. So the same way that they pinged people's phones in your earlier example, asking what's your level of, would you fast forward? This one was, how happy are you? You'd think throughout the entirety of the day leading up to the night out, then the night out, it might be 12 midnight before they're so drunk they can't remember anything, but just as the DJ starts to really ramp the setup and the lights are going and the bottle service is in or whatever it might be. But it wasn't. The time that they had the most fun throughout the entirety of their day and night of a night out was when they were getting ready together in the house. It was in anticipation of the event. It was not the event itself. And just continuing to remind myself, dopamine is not about the happiness. It's not about the pursuit of happiness. It's about the happiness of pursuit, right? Like, you have to find enjoyment in the journey because there is no destination. Every single time that you reach a destination, it's just the way marker of the next journey that you're going to do.
And even in the sort of, people often say that like, oh, you shifted the goalpost when you got there. But you actually become a totally different person en route to the destination. Like if someone is trying to, I don't know, make money on the side, and they're like, oh my God, like, if only I could make $2,000 a month of passive income, that would completely change my life. It's like, yeah, it would. But by the time you get to $1,500 a month, $1,500 a month of passive income, you have become a fundamentally different person. You have a new set of skills. You have a new set of hopes, beliefs, expectations. You have way more self-confidence. And now suddenly 2K doesn't seem like much. You're like, 10K. I know people have 10K a month passive income. And by the time you get there, you're like, well, that's not 100K.
Yeah.
And the goalpost keeps on shifting. And actually, I don't think there is anything wrong with that. We just need to recognize it for what it is and recognize that, as you say, fundamentally, the journey is the destination.
Yeah.
So,
all right. What about seek clarity? Why is clarity important?
Clarity. So, the first third of the book is about how do we find ways to energize us and make things feel more enjoyable. So, play power in people. The second third is about how do we beat procrastination. And there are basically 3 core blockers that cause us to procrastinate from stuff: uncertainty, fear, and inertia. And so seeking clarity is really about that first step. If someone has the goal of, I want to get fit, what the hell does that mean? Like, they're going to procrastinate on that for their entire life because they have no idea what get fit actually means. Like, who knows? How do you break that down? Students, if they have the goal of like, I want to revise for my chemistry exam, it's like, okay, but what does that mean? Are you reading a textbook? Are you doing some practice papers? Like, there's a lot of mental cognitive friction involved in trying to figure out what the hell you're actually trying to do. And the point around clarity is that if you're ever struggling with procrastination, just ask yourself, am I actually clear on what I need to do here? Am I clear on why I'm doing it? And am I clear on when I'm going to do it? What, why, and when? And if we can just get clear on those 3 things, that will cure procrastination for the vast majority of people. What's a goal? Why is that a goal? And okay, cool. What's the next action? And when? And when am I going to do it? Which is why I'm so bullish on just putting a thing in the calendar. Because once it's in the calendar, at least then you have sorted the clarity point. And now if you're still procrastinating from it, now there's probably some emotional issues that we have to deal with. But like, at least let's just get it in the calendar and define what the task actually is.
So that's the first step from a tactical perspective for you?
Absolutely, yeah. It's got to be in the calendar. I think one of the best time management strategies I've ever found is something called the ideal week, where, a lot of people say that they don't have time, they have a never-ending to-do list. The ideal week is basically where you create a blank Google Calendar, you call it your ideal week, and you just block out, what does your ideal week look like? When would you like to wake up? When would you like to sleep? When are your gym times? When are your date nights? When are you at work? And you realize by doing this that A, you have more time than you realize, and also you have less time than you realize. Because if you wanted to do those 18 projects on your to-do list, and someone listening to this is probably, somewhat productivity minded, wants to get a lot of things done at a very high level, you realize there are simply not enough hours in the day. And that's okay. That means you can now eliminate the things that really don't matter in focus of the things that really do. And so the ideal week is a way of figuring out, do I actually have a manageable number of things on my plate? And once you do, putting them in your actual calendar is a way of making sure you've made the time for the thing.
Have you thought about how people can learn to say no more effectively?
Yeah, we've got some stuff in the book around this. This is something I really struggle with. I love Derek Sivers' thing of hell yeah or no. If it's not a hell yeah, then it's a no. I love the idea of never saying yes over the phone or in person, and always being like...
That's Daniel Kahneman's thing, right?
It is, yeah. He never says yes over the phone. Let me check my calendar and get back to you. I love to offload things to be like, you know what, let me just check with my team because they manage my calendar, because then I'm not the bad guy and saying no to the thing.
Do you think you're a people pleaser?
Absolutely.
Yeah, me too. It's so
really?
bad, dude. Yeah, it's so bad. Yeah. I've only just realized this recently. I started doing therapy for the first time properly in person in Austin. The lady that I've started working with worked with a friend who is way, way, way more of a bastard than I am. Yeah. And I figured if she can deal with his shit, she can definitely deal with my shit. So he was the canary in the coal mine. And I don't know. I think I probably, if I'd done enough self-assessment, I would have realized that I was a people pleaser. But I think it felt a bit emasculating to realize it felt like, I don't know, cucked or agreeable or feminine or something that I just didn't like the idea of. And there's still a lot with me of vestigial compensatory mechanisms from feeling weak in school. from being fragile and bullied and stuff in school. So I don't want to show that, like, the vulnerabilities that I already have, I'm happy to accept. But new ones, well, no, because that's just another piece on the pile of you might be a fragile, weak piece of shit, right? But this was a new one, and it stared me in the face for long enough during sessions where I was like, right, okay, I can't escape this. I hate telling people bad news. I hate disappointing people. I somehow managed to find a way to be able to blame myself for something which was evidently somebody else's fault. Let's say that someone in the team messes up and gets something wrong, and it was completely on them. I feel bad about telling them that they did something bad because it's going to make them feel bad, and I don't want them to feel bad, even though it was their fucking fault.
Yep. I know what you mean, mate. I have exactly the same. Like, how are you dealing with this? Any tips?
A couple of the things that have helped a lot for me, the big productions that I've done in person are sufficiently high stakes that they've pushed the boundary of what I'm prepared to expect from people. So for instance, we did 7 episodes in 3 days in London a couple of weeks ago. I need the guys to be on the ball for that. And I also need to be able to get people to do things that I can't do. Like if I'm hungry and I need a sandwich, I need to shout, yo, can someone get me a sandwich? Like that previously would have been like, who the fuck am I to ask for a sandwich? What is this? Like, can you come and feed me grapes and fan me with a leaf? But like just formative experiences where you need to make commands and demands of other people. That's one. Another one has been more of a realization that the standards that you hold yourself to are the minimum standard that you should hold everybody else to as well, right? Like, I know that I work hard. For all that there's a current trend on the internet of laying all of my success at the feet of either Love Island or the way that I look, given that this is... Yeah, I did a trigonometry episode, and they decided to call it like the truth about confidence, and it triggered some people on the internet, which was hilarious. Given the fact that this is a podcast, which is bigger on audio, literally where my face doesn't exist, than on YouTube where it does. Anyway,
yeah, but your YouTube banner is like you doing that.
That's like, true, but that's not on Spotify. It's just my fucking head. Anyway, that insight around. I know that I work really, really hard. I know that the standards that I hold myself to are very high. So saying, okay, I should expect other people to at least be in the same universe as me shouldn't be something that you feel guilty about. It's like, look, if the guy that's at one component within a team, whether you're the top of the tree or, at the bottom of the tree, it doesn't matter. But if you're working hard, you can quite happily expect other people to be like, hey, I did it. My stuff was done on time. Right? So setting an example, I think, as a people pleaser is good. If you're a people pleaser who also doesn't work hard, that's going to be a tough circle to square. Yeah. Because you're not going to be able to set an example and to say, hey, I did it. My stuff was done on time. Right? Helping other people understand why you're doing it. So as a good example, there was a couple of times where Dean had booked to go away at like bad times of the year, not through any fault of his own, and then we'd started to apply a lot more work to him. And I was like, hey, dude, me and Chase got our stuff done. You didn't get your stuff done, right? Like, this is just fact. And he was like, man, I do not want to be the bottleneck. I'll fix it. And I was like, that was a nice way to get past it. So using yourself, not in a like, mate, I've already got my, not sort of making people feel belittled, but starting 10 toes forward in like, I am doing my things. Everybody else needs to follow along behind that. That seems to be a good route too. But it's hard, man. The people pleasing thing for me is like, I find it hard to upset people on the podcast. I find it hard to tell people in my personal life things that they don't want to hear. All of these, it looks like it's resonating with your soul.
100%. Yeah, this is literally I'm in the midst of some like family drama that's literally a result of me wanting to. If someone is upset with me, then my default is like, shit, let me try and do whatever I can to fix it.
Yeah. And not, hey, you're in the wrong.
Yeah.
I'm not supposed to fucking apologize for this.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's rough, man. I've got Dr. Robert Glover, No More Mr. Nice Guy.
I love that book. I've read it. I read it every few years, and I would keep highlighting the shit out of it and doing the exercises.
I've got him coming on in January. Yeah, I'm looking forward to speaking to him. Maybe he'll be the answer. But as with most things, man, you become aware of something about yourself that you're maybe not that happy with, and then you obsess about it and you think, oh my God, this is like one of the defining characteristics of my pathology as a human. And then you realize, oh no, this is just one ingredient in the entire meal of the things that are wrong with me. But But yeah,
But it's also okay because people love you for who you are.
of all of the different maladies and stuff that you could have, being a people pleaser isn't the worst. But I do think that it'll be interesting for me and you to check in a couple of years' time and be like, hey, how's the people pleasing thing going? You definitely get, you look at older people and they're a bit more grumpy sometimes, and they seem to be less people pleasy. So maybe it's just going to come along for the ride as a byproduct of getting older. I don't know.
One point on the therapy thing. So our mutual friend Bill Perkins, when we were hung out with him in Austin,
when we tried to teach you to wake surf,
that was a real fail. I don't know. I think if I do it the second time around, the muscle memory will kick in. But I was asking him, because obviously I love Die with Zero, made a video about it, etc., etc. Oh, loved your interview with him, by the way. That interview with him was a direct result of why I'm currently like digital nomading around the world.
Wow.
Because before that interview, I was like, I'll just rent a home base in London and be based in London. After that interview, I was like, I need to freaking go for it. Like,
this is the last time I'll have kids and blah, blah, blah. Yeah.
So
well, I mean, the only reason that
he
came on the podcast is because of your video about him.
Oh, no way.
I learned about the book from your YouTube channel, brought Bill on the show. Bill smashed it. Bill then changed your digital nomad thing. And as a part of your digital nomad thing, you came to Austin, where I introduced you to Bill Perkins.
And then when we were in Austin and on his freaking boat, I asked him what are the biggest ROI purchases of his life. And he said, hands down, couples therapy.
Relationship coach.
And so I've now started literally the following week, I started working with a couples therapist. / relationships coach. It has been absolutely phenomenally game-changing. I cannot recommend it highly enough to literally anyone. If you're in a relationship, then doing relationship coaching with someone who's a professional, who's experienced the full gamut of all of the shit that couples talk about and struggle with is just incredibly helpful.
What's it done for you? Why is it so useful?
It's really useful because it's given me tools to have conversations that I just didn't really have before. I think there are some couples who are just amazing at communication by default. Very few. Like most couples do not say, oh my God, we communicate so much. Like we're just so good at communication. Literally every couple says like, yeah, man, relationships are hard. Communication's the main thing. And so one of those things is like, it's going to sound potentially simple, but listening out for the needs behind what the other person is feeling. Like if the other person is upset with anything or sad or angry or frustrated or hurt, any of these emotions, there is always a core need that they have that is not being met. And instead of kind of talking at the level of, is the fridge door left open or closed, or are we going here or there? It's like, what's the core need? Does she she has a need for feeling empowered when it comes to decision making. Okay. So now that we know what the need is, and then usually if you describe a need to someone, they're like, yeah, that's it. Like I have a need for fairness and contribution in the relationship. And when we kind of landed on those two needs, that really was, yeah, that's literally it. Like those two needs explain a lot of my behaviors in relationships and outside of relationships.
Without the other person's perspective, presumably you would just get caught up at what the problems are at the top, not what the subtext is that sits below it.
Exactly. And this is where I think, I would say my IQ is reasonable, but my EQ is probably lower than I would like it to be.
Right.
So I think I'm working on. And so when my girlfriend and I would have issues around like, I don't know, planning a trip, I would get caught up in the level of like, okay, but I've got my book coming out and it's important for me that we go to LA to do this podcast or all this sort of stuff. But when I realized that she has a need to feel empowered in decision making, I'm like, oh, I can just get her involved in the decision making about
Where
this.
do you want to go? I'll find a podcast that's in that city.
Yeah, but also like, hey, let's approach this as a team, as a conversation, rather than me doing all the working in my head and coming. So this was another big realization. If someone were to say to me, if my partner were to say to me, Ali, for the next 3 months, I've got everything planned. Don't you worry about it. Like, you just come along for the ride, and life's going to be great. We're going to go Southeast Asia. I would think, thank the Lord. That's incredible. I love that someone else is making the decisions here. I can focus on my work, which is the thing I care about. Life is good. Whereas for my girlfriend, that same arrangement makes her feel disempowered and is therefore terrible. And so a lot of the couples therapy and relationship coaching is recognizing that the patterns of thought that we think are so natural to us are absolutely not necessarily natural for the other person, and just understanding that. It's like, oh, okay, you have a need for connection, and that is solved by having a cuddle in the morning for a minute. Great, that's easy enough. Or like, hugging when we greet each other. It's not a thing that I would naturally do.
Is that in the calendar?
Not yet.
Cuddle in the morning, 1 minute.
It's in the habit tracker.
Right, okay.
So it's just been super, super helpful in that, and on that front, just as a way of us being better at communicating. Would recommend.
What about sustaining? So, what we've spoken about finding a way to make things more enjoyable, overcoming procrastination, but then doing this along a long period of time, the next 10, 20, 30, 40 years of your working life, your creative life is what really matters. I think I heard you say on a podcast recently, the reason that you'd been successful was a combination of a tiny little bit of talent, mostly luck and good timing with consistency.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is the thing. So anyone can be super productive or super disciplined for a short amount of time.
January.
Yeah, January, or like the first 2 weeks of January. Very few of us can actually sustain that unless we really put effort into what does consistency and sustainability look like. One of my favorite Morgan Housel quotes is, "I'm not going to do anything unless I can do it forever." And it's like, that's a really good way of thinking about it. And so I kind of boiled it down to 3 things, 3 tools that help combat burnout and lead to more sustainability and productivity. It's conserve, recharge, and align. And each of these 3 strategies tackles a different aspect of burnout. So broadly, three different types of burnout. There is overexertion burnout. You're just trying to do too much shit. Depletion burnout, where your energy levels are so low and you're not giving yourself the chance to replenish your energy levels. And then misalignment burnout, which is sometimes the hardest one to deal with, which is where everything seems to be going well, but actually what the actions you're taking in the here and now are not aligned with the future that you actually intrinsically want for yourself. Maybe it's something other people are expecting of you or whatever the thing might be. And so those 3 things really stop stuff from being sustainable.
Conserve. How do we do that?
Conserve is basically about recognizing that, A, we need to limit the amount of things that we're doing, because one of the issues with to-do lists is that they are infinite. And you can always keep adding stuff to a to-do list. And so a lot of people who want to be high performers and productivity bros and stuff will just keep adding things to their to-do list and think, you know what, I've got to juggle all these balls in the air. But one of the things I love about Oliver Berkman's philosophy from 4,000 Weeks is there is simply too much shit to do, and you will never have enough time for any of it, for all of it. Therefore, you have to make some sacrifices. The way I personally do this is, this ideal week method. If it doesn't fit in the ideal week, I don't have time for it. But also something that I call the energy investment portfolio, which is basically, I have a long bucket list in a sort of Kanban board, but you can do it however you want. I have a long bucket list of things I would like to do. And then I have a very short list of the 3 to 5 things I'm actually investing energy into right now. And so back in the day, I made the mistake in lockdown of like, I've got so much time. I'm going to have guitar lessons and singing lessons and piano lessons and art lessons because I want to learn all this stuff. Let me try and learn some Japanese on the side. Just doing too much stuff. Making focused progress in a few small number of things is way more effective than trying to make 1 mile of progress in 1,000 different directions. So a big part of conserve is actually just this thing of learning to say no and getting things off our plate. I really like a strategy that's called the 6-week trap, which is, if you imagine yourself, someone's asking you to do a thing, but it's more than 6 weeks out. You look at your calendar, more than 6 weeks out. It's pretty chill, right? The calendar's looking pretty blank. Oh, glorious. Yeah, I'm around. I can totally do that thing. And obviously, the time rolls around, the calendar's gotten full up again. You're completely overwhelmed, and you're like, fuck, I shouldn't have said yes to that thing.
If you wouldn't do it tomorrow, don't say yes for in 6 months' time.
Exactly. Yeah. And so conserve is really A, about kind of limiting the number of things that we're doing, and B, also kind of on a micro level, actually just focusing on one thing at a time. This is, again, classic stuff that everyone knows, but the idea of kind of switching costs and attention residues, switching between multiple tasks means you're just less efficient at each of them, and you're wasting a lot of energy by not doing things one at a time. And so the basic stuff that people know, but I find myself, I was reading the audiobook for this a couple weeks ago, and it was really the final 3 chapters where I was like, oh my God, I need to take my own advice. Because I was feeling overwhelmed. I had too much stuff on my calendar. I felt all of it was important, but it really wasn't. And as I was narrating the audiobook for those chapters, I was like, okay, action point there, let me actually do this. So it's
strange. I mean, even just that insight that the guy who wrote the book doesn't always necessarily take the advice that he wrote down, I think is good for people to know. It's important for people to know, because one of the problems that some people that listen to this podcast tell me about is I hear all of these great strategies and I get overwhelmed with how many of the different things there are that I could do, that I could apply to my own life. And it seems like everybody else has got their shit together. It's like, look, let me promise you, I've been around some of the most famous, successful, high status people on the planet, and it's idiots all the way up.
Yep.
Right? It's people who do not know what they're doing. They haven't gotten, everyone is trying their best and failing.
That's the one. I was listening to Mark Manson's interview with Morgan Housel yesterday on a run, because part of my thing is like, I want to do 30 minutes of exercise each day. And one of the things that Mark said was, once he became rich and had all these problems around like status and money and things like that, boohoo, he read his book and he realized, oh shit, all of the principles in the subtle art of not giving a fuck apply to this exact situation that I'm currently in. I just didn't realize it, and so took his own advice.
So the book that made him famous and successful contained in it the answers to the problems of his fame and success.
Exactly. And he didn't realize that until like a couple of years after suffering through the problems.
The application of stuff, the application of these ideas, of everything that we go through. This is why I love Tim Ferriss's idea, the good shit sticks. It's like the most robust way, I think, to get over the guilt of your external brain Evernote not being perfectly optimized, or, your fucking Ebbinghaus forgetting curve Anki spaced repetition thing not reminding you of all of the quotes that you want to. It's like, look, if there's something from one podcast a week or one book per month that you can't stop thinking about, that's the thing. Right? That is the thing. It's self-selected for it, like mimetic evolution inside of your own mind. That's the thing that you need to work on. What can you not stop telling people about? Screen recording it, sending it in group chats, it's written on a post-it note. Like, that's the thing. The good shit will stick and everything else can fall away. Again, this is like, it's like feel-good productivity. It's like feel resonance, progression.
Yeah.
Right? What is the thing that you can't stop thinking about? That's the thing that you can focus on, because it's the easiest thing for you to not stop thinking about.
Yeah. And I think this point around like, there's in this book, initially it was twice as long and there were twice as many strategies, and our editor was like, bro, we need to cut them down. And even now there are 9 chapters, 54 actionable experiments that people can apply in their life. But, the whole thing that I'm trying to get across in this book is that the goal is not to apply all 54 at once. The goal is to apply them one at a time and see what vibes, see what problem you are having in your life right now. I mean, there's no such thing as a problem, but like what situation you're trying to deal with. What is a strategy that might help? Try it out for yourself. Does it work? Does it not? Cool. Either way, it's an experiment. You've gained data and you can see how to make it work for you. For some people, they realize the way to be consistent at the gym is to do it first thing in the morning. For some people, they realize it's in the afternoon. For some people, it's an accountability buddy. For some people, it's doing CrossFit. For some people, it's tracking their workouts using an app. It's different things for different people. But the point is, as long as you are finding the things that work for you and not trying to overload your brain by doing all of them at once, that is kind of this path of continuous and never-ending improvement.
Recharge.
There's a fun experiment that I like to ask people when they say that they're struggling or like burned out or anything like that, which is, what are the things you find yourself doing when you are drained of energy? And then separately, what are the things that actually recharge your energy? So for example, when I find myself drained of energy, I will default to scrolling on Twitter or Instagram or whatever, randomly opening YouTube for no reason, randomly refreshing my YouTube analytics. It's like, okay. But what are the things that actually recharge my energy? Do any of those things? Have I ever left a scrolling session from TikTok feeling, wow, I feel so refreshed? Absolutely not. I don't know anyone who's left a scrolling session on TikTok feeling really refreshed. Again, I'm not saying TikTok is bad, but like, broadly, I'm in favor of people doing things intentionally. If for you scrolling Instagram and watching cooking videos or whatever the thing is, in fact recharges your energy, then great, you are in the very small minority of people. For most of us, it does not. And so part of recharging is to recognize that, hey, I care about my energy levels. My energy levels affect my entire life, because when we are feeling high energy, we feel happier, more fulfilled, more productive, sure. So let me actually just do the things and incorporate things into my life that genuinely recharge my energy. Unfortunately, this is the basic shit. Sleeping well, doing some exercise, having a nap, spending some time in nature. Creative hobbies are very recharging. This is why painting is a great hobby that a lot of people land on as being a thing. Knitting, crocheting, anything like that like gives us that feeling that we are making progress, that we have autonomy.
Low stakes.
Yeah, you're not trying to monetize it too much. Like all of that stuff. It's important to have creative hobbies. Generally recharges your energy way more than watching Netflix or scrolling TikTok.
So there's a vicious cycle here. I came up with this idea of productivity purgatory. I think I told you about this before, but productivity purgatory is when the things that you do to enjoy life and recharge are only done in order to facilitate your productivity when you stop doing them. Right? So you don't go for a walk in nature because you want to enjoy your time in nature. You do it because you once listened to an Andrew Huberman podcast that said 15 minutes of sunlight in the eyes improves your dopaminergic response, which means that you can be 5% more productive that day. Right? Productivity purgatory describes an environment in which nothing that you do is not for productivity. And it's dangerous, right? And this is something, it's like recharge is both a productivity strategy, but also a life piece of advice, right? You need to do things that are not just the thing that involves work. Even if you absolutely love work, you can't keep doing it. Your work will benefit from this, but it can't be in service of the work, or else you end up in productivity purgatory.
This is the thing. Like, I've been rereading The Power of Now, and it's just such good advice. Do the thing for the sake of the thing itself. The way that I'm trying to apply this is in the shower each morning. Because in the shower is like a clear place where like I look forward to Mondays. I love hanging out with my team and like doing the work stuff. And I sometimes find myself thinking, I just want to get to the end of the shower so that I can like get involved with the team. I'm like, no, what the fuck am I doing? Like, I'm having a hot shower. The present moment is literally all there is. And I just need to remind myself, okay, I'm having a shower to have a shower. Not so that I can then do my hair and stuff and film the next video. I'm going for a walk to simply go for a walk. Not so that I can actually get my steps in while also consuming the audiobook at 3 times speed. And that is again, it comes back to this idea of holding seemingly conflicting ideas in mind at the same time. One idea, which is that, the happiness of pursuit is like pursuing stuff feels very dopaminergic, but also enjoying the present moment and focusing on it is a very contented place to be.
Yeah, so there's George Mack has this idea of dopamine George and serotonin George.
Oh, yeah.
And he says, I want to spend as much time in serotonin George as I can. Dopamine George looks after himself. Like dopamine George is a cocaine addict. And serotonin George is a quiet guitar player. And spending more time in serotonin. Now, there's a third one that I want to start talking about with him soon, which is cortisol George. And cortisol George is somewhere between, like, he's even further down the line than dopamine George is. It's frantic. It's like kind of like tense and uncomfortable. But yeah, man, a lot of the people that
oxytocin George.
Oxytocin,
like lots of cuddling.
True. I guess that's on the other side of serotonin George. But yeah, man, everyone spends way too much time in dopamine, whoever they are. It's using the power of progression and targets and achievement and money and extrinsic motivation and all of that sort of stuff. And even intrinsic motivation of, oh, wow, I got better at that thing. Like, that's fantastic. But how many hours this year did you spend lying underneath a tree? Like, that's a good metric for serotonin Ali or serotonin Chris or serotonin George.
Yeah, I think this is why also why I love honestly the main thing that I've taken away from writing this book is just the title, Feel Good Productivity, because it's seemingly contradictory, because productivity is always about pursuit and feeling good is about enjoying the moment, and both of those things are okay. And we just if we're doing both, we are really, really winning, working towards a fulfilling life, enjoying the dopamine and also enjoying the serotonin along the way.
We spoke about this on stage in front of maybe 1,000 people in Brighton a couple of months ago. And you kind of reveal the end of the book, which is what a lot of people might have thought would have been at the start of it, which is to do with what are you actually working on? Yeah. Like, what are the goals that you're choosing to do? Why put that at the end of the book?
Yeah. So initially, when I did the first draft of the book, the first chapter was about figuring out your direction in life. Because my whole idea was like, look, productivity, fine, but there's no point in driving 100 miles in a particular direction if you find out it was the wrong direction to drive in. And so a big part of productivity is really asking yourself the question of what are the things I'm working on and why am I working on them? But it was a bit heavy for chapter 1. And I didn't want the conclusion to be, hey, I don't enjoy my job, therefore Ali Abdaal's telling me the only thing I can do is quit my job and follow my passion. Like, that's not the vibe. It's the final chapter and it's called Align, because it's about aligning your actions in the here and now with where you actually want to go. And it's a final chapter because even if you're not there yet, most people listening to this are probably don't have the level of autonomy and freedom that you and I do, having grinded at this shit while enjoying the process for a very long time. If you have a day job and you don't enjoy the day job, the solution is not the way to get to feel good productivity is not to simply quit the day job. It's to try all the other things first. Find a way to approach it with play and power. Find a way to get people involved. Make sure you're not procrastinating. Make sure you're doing the right things to recharge your energy. Once you have done all of those things, if you are still feeling that the things I'm doing don't feel aligned, I'm getting this misalignment burnout, at that point, it's now time for us to start thinking about the big questions. So one strategy I really enjoy that I think is super helpful for everyone to do is to just write their own obituary. I did this a couple of months ago. It was pretty eye-opening. And it's this idea that Stephen Covey talks about as well. Begin with the end in mind. There is something about imagining yourself on your deathbed surrounded by loved ones and imagining what would they say at my funeral? What are they saying around me? What would my obituary read? That really helps get rid of the bullshit of like what doesn't matter and helps us focus on what really does, which is often relationships rather than work. So that's one useful strategy.
He always answered his emails on time, and he was really great at keeping the Notion template up to date. No.
And he drove 7% returns for our hedge fund every year. It's like, no one gives a shit. It's like, he was humble. He enjoyed spending time with people around him. He energized the people around him. He was always there for us. He was supportive. He was kind. He was warm. Derren Brown, in his book Happy, which is about stoicism, has a really good idea that I often come back to, which is we think people want impressive, but actually what they want is just warm. And warmth is way more important than impressiveness. And in like networking events, when meeting people, it's like people will often try and present some sort of, I am impressive because XYZ. But actually, a lot of people just want warmth. And so beginning with the end in mind, thinking, what would I want people to say on my deathbed? What would I want written on my gravestone? Can be a really helpful way of thinking, is the way that I'm currently living aligned with what I would like that to be?
One of the things that I've always struggled with, and I felt, I came up through the trenches of productivity, 7 or 8 years ago, because I was adamant that the solution, there's more there, because I was adamant that the solution was, if only I had a perfectly designed Notion template, all of my problems would go away. And one of the tools that's often in there is begin with the end in mind, start with a 25-year-long outcome broken down into 5-year like marathons, broken down into 1-year meta goals, broken down into 90-day sprints, broken down into daily actions, broken down into micro disciplines. Right, okay, fantastic. Like I understand why that sort of stuff works. 25-year goals, 5-year goals, 1-year goals. 1-year goals just about is on the very, very brink of what I can do. I'm so bad at long-term planning. I'm so bad at knowing what I want to do over the long term. And it used to, I appreciate the fact that you say not putting the goals thing at the beginning was a strategy done to try and help people get moving, because there's easier steps that you can go along that path, because I'm very much that sort of a person. A lot of the strategy planning and goal, like productivity planning systems that I came across, I fell at the first hurdle because that goal setting thing for me just really, really struggled to resonate. What is better about the obituary solution, I suppose, is it's not about what are the outcomes that you want. It's about what is the feeling and the sense that you want to have left behind. It's not saying what's your net worth going to be at age 80? How many YouTube videos will you have created? What is the sort of setup of the company that you want? It's much more vibey, right?
Yeah, exactly.
It's all about the vibe.
I think I also tried the whole like figure out a 50-year plan and break it down into 5-year chunks method. And I was just like, come on, like my life is so different now than it was even 2 or 3 years ago. Like there's no way in hell I could even vaguely begin to predict what the future looks like. But the way I found to square this is to recognize that the further out we go, the fuzzier the destination becomes. But that's okay, because the point of the destination is to give us a direction. It's not actually the destination itself.
And you can check in and continue to readjust.
Absolutely.
Yeah, but I mean, the vibe is very unlikely to change, right?
Yeah.
I want people to feel understood, seen, warm, less fearful, like comfortable in my presence. I want to leave the world in a better place than I arrived at it, in a way that is enlightening and hopefully not too serious. Like, okay. And that's the same across my friends, my family, the people that I talk to on the internet, all of that stuff. All right. None of those things really have none of it comes to bear on the business organization that I have, or the revenue, or the videos, or any of that sort of stuff. Or, it's, do I arrive on time for dinner with my friends, right? Do I have enough respect for my friends that I'm going to make sure that I set off early and arrive on time? It's like little decisions like that. Those are really what I think ultimately are going to define the kind of memories that you leave behind.
Yeah. I also vibe with what you said around 1-year plans. Well, 1-year plan is also the longest time horizon that I can feasibly plan in. And even then, the way I think of it is in each different domain of life, and there are like 9 of them, 3 in health, work, and relationships. You split up the pie however you want. In each of those different domains, what am I celebrating 12 months from now? So in my work life around like learning, I'd love to celebrate actually becoming really, really good at understanding the longevity stuff. I've been wanting to do it for a while. It's like, cool. I'd like to celebrate that. In my romantic life, I'd like to celebrate getting married. Cool, easy. In my friendships, I'd like to celebrate the fact that every quarter we went on like a little lads road trip. Okay, cool. Now those are my goals. And now I can employ all my productivity strategies of like, putting in the ideal week, making sure I've got time, writing it down on my projects list to just remind myself that this is a thing that I actually care about. Because otherwise we get caught up in the day-to-day of life and we forget that, oh yeah, I did intend to organize a trip with my friends every few months. Haven't done that in a while. I've got to spare half an hour now. Why don't I just do some research on Airbnb? And just those little reminders is where I think productivity strategies are super, super helpful. But becoming obsessed with the systems then kind of detracts from everything else in life.
Well, it's turning the bar stool upside down, right? Productivity is there to facilitate the outcomes that you want to achieve. Yeah. And those should be downstream from the vibe and the sort of life that you want, right? It shouldn't be, I'm going to employ productivity strategies and allow the vibe of my life to occur out of those. Absolutely. It doesn't grow out of the productivity strategies. Yeah. So this is going to be out December 26th.
That's right. In the US, December 28th worldwide.
Okay. This episode's going to drop like December 19th. Sweet. So people can go and pre-buy it now on Amazon. Ali Abdaal, Feel Good Productivity. What's this keyboard?
Oh, this keyboard. This is a tech brand called Light Mode that we are in the process of launching. It will have launched by the time this is out.
Hell yeah.
We're trying to do like productivity, desk accessories, stuff in your bag, all that kind of stuff, but not aimed at gamers, aimed at like people who like the Apple aesthetic a little bit, who want things to be a little bit more light and free and playful and stuff. So this is our mechanical keyboard.
How long have you been working on that?
Mate, this is like a 2-year-long process to try and find the perfect click and the perfect switch and the perfect amount of lube to put on the keys. Okay, and the perfect weight of the metal plate and all of that
When I think of you, I think about lube research, actually. That is one of the first places that I go to. Yeah, man.
So people can check that out if they want. If you're interested in a clacky-sounding mechanical keyboard.
What is that, lightmode.com?
Lightmode.com, exactly.
Hell yeah. Ali, I appreciate you. I look forward to seeing how this book gets on. You know that you're going to smash it. It's very much needed, I think. And given that we're about to go into the new year and people are going to be thinking, right, I need to get myself together. New year, new me, new productivity strategy. There's the book.
Yeah. Hopefully it's helpful for some people.
Hell yeah.
And good luck with your drink as well. It's super nice.
Thank you, man.
My one.
If you enjoyed that episode, then press here for a selection of the best clips from the podcast over the last few weeks. And don't forget to subscribe.